presentation here. So I want to start just by looking at this computing timeline, and it's kind of interesting as we look at cloud computing. You know, I think of back in the 60s and 70s when everybody used mainframes. There was basically one big computer with a mainframe, and all the users were on a dumb terminal. And then, you know, we realized that, you know, mini computers were the vogue, and some of the early PCs that people had more ability to do things on their own instead of having to do it all based upon that big computer and wait for the IT department. And that worked out for many years until all of a sudden, you know, we started getting into laptops and mobile and smaller computers. And all the low-cost PCs were out there, and it's like, you know, more and more power on a smaller and smaller device. And here we are now full circle into the whole idea of cloud and virtualization, and we're all the way back to basically one big computer with users on what is essentially a dumb terminal in many cases. So it's just amazing how the cycles kind of go full circle all the way around. The guy talking to you right here, right now, that's me, Terry O'Rourke. I'm the president of Common Sense Solutions. We've been doing this for over 20 years, and basically this is all we do is help small businesses figure out whether they should be doing cloud or network or hosted or some individual combination of those types of things. Before I started this company, I was an IT director for a division of Eastman Kodak. We had about 450 people that we were supporting. So I've been in IT for a long time, and we're dealing with a lot of these issues. So what we're going to try to cover with you today is what is cloud computing, why you may want to consider using it, why people do, and also why people don't, what it costs, where you might be able to save money, and some of the pros and cons. We're really trying to give you a balanced view here. I don't think it's, we're not trying to push that you should be doing cloud or shouldn't be doing cloud. We really are looking and saying, well, what's the right thing for you? And really just to kind of set the stage here, you see this picture of a power grid. And a lot of people are pushing that that's the way that you should think of cloud computing. Basically, when you plug in your toaster, you don't really care where the power is coming from. When I'm in an audience and I ask people, does anybody know where their power plant that they get their power comes from? Nobody knows. And they don't really care as long as it works. And so that's kind of the same thing with cloud computing. It's like you don't really care where your programs are. They're just there. That's the general idea, the general concept. Of course, it's not exactly the same thing because, you know, a power plant isn't as cheap as a server, so you wouldn't want to buy your own power plant, whereas buying your own server is still a viable option. And electricity really is a pretty simple thing. I mean, you just, you know, I'm sure it's not simple if you're in the power plant, but, you know, it's not like there's all these thousands of moving parts of software to deal with. There's a lot more complexity. But still, there is a lot of analogy. So oftentimes the question I get is, well, where is the cloud exactly? If it's a cloud, where is it? And the answer is it's really just sitting in a very nondescript building. Could be anywhere, you know, around you, actually, or anywhere in the world. And basically inside those buildings, which don't usually have glass in them at all, actually they usually look more like bunkers, it's just a whole bunch of rooms full of server computers. And just literally rows and rows and rows of these computers that are there with all of the redundant power and redundant internet speeds and all of the cooling and everything else, guarded facilities, all that kind of thing. To make sure that it's all secure and up and running, you know, pretty much close to 100% of the time. So basically the cloud is somewhere on the internet, really. It's in the data center. And really you shouldn't care about that physical location for the most part. You want to make sure you have a reliable connection and that's secure. And the reason it's called the cloud is because when anybody being a network technician will draw a picture of a network, the internet is always depicted as a cloud because it's not, there's no one location that you say, oh, that's where the internet is. It's not like I point to a server. I can't point to the internet. It's not a physical one place. It's a number of different places. So that's why the name got there. You'll also sometimes hear it called SaaS, if you ever heard the word SaaS, software as a service, or hosted. Sometimes people talk about hosting, and they'll use those terms somewhat synonymously. Now, if you're in the cloud, you may be able to reduce a large part of your hardware. You shouldn't, for example, if you move back up into the cloud, you don't need a tape drive. All that's being done in that cloud data center environment. So you may not need any servers at all. But as I mentioned, the software investment is really, typically metered, again, much like an electrical bill. So just like you only pay for as much electricity as you actually use, the same thing if you're using all cloud is also true in that you're only paying for what you use. Most of the services are actually charged on a per month per user basis instead of buying it one time and you're all done. And we'll talk about some of the economics of that as we go forward. So one of the questions that we're seeing lots of people predict is that pretty much everybody's going to be in the cloud eventually in one form or another. And while that may be true, I'm not sure that I believe the people who say that you'll have no choice, that you have to be in cloud or nothing. Not that they're not trying. Certainly, everybody writing new software is writing it to be in this SaaS model, software as a service, again, as I mentioned. And there's lots and lots of money going into building cloud services. And one of the good things about that is a lot of our clients have benefited from that if they're people providing electrical services or HVAC or even building those buildings. There's lots of need to build all these data centers. So it's been a good thing for construction in general, especially the ones that are around here, and they're all over the country. But why now specifically? Why all of a sudden is cloud getting to be such a big deal? There's actually a number of things that are driving this. One is that most of you hopefully have seen the speed of the internet has increased dramatically. There are lots of money being spent not only on data centers, but being spent on delivering infrastructure to allow the internet to move fast. So that broadband access, it used to be you had a DSL or you had a relatively slow, what was the T1 was the big thing, and that T1 could easily cost $1,500 to $2,000 a month. Well, of course, now a T1 is actually more often a backup device, and it's usually running about $200 to $250 a month. So the prices have come way down, and I think because of the fiber and the cable, those prices have come have come down as well. Mobile device growth is driving this as well. Anybody using a tablet or an iPad or even their phone as a computing device, they want to have that fast internet available to them. They don't want to have to worry about running all the applications on that device. Another thing is more of a technical term. It's the idea of virtualization. And without getting too technical about it, virtualization basically allows one server to appear as several servers. So the advantage there in those data centers is that you're not worrying about so much about fitting, a room. If that data center is as big as a football field, if every server had to be a full server, it'd be as big as 5 football fields. But because of this thing called virtualization, each one of those servers is actually operating and looking to the outside user like several servers. So that's really made it more cost effective. I mentioned about the capacity build-outs. And one other part of it that, is just it's money, like it is with anything in most cases. The software vendors are looking for those new revenue streams. The example I like to give, I'm talking about on the next page here, is Microsoft. This is not unique to Microsoft at all, but just to use them as the example. Why would they do this? Why would they want to go to a software as a service and push everybody to the cloud? Well, the reason is that they get recurring revenue out of that. So instead of having to sell you and tell you or anybody else, hey, buy the next version of Office, it's only going to cost you $300 or $400. What if instead you pay $5 or $10 or $15 or $20 a month per user? So what's the benefit of that? Well, number one, it's now an annuity to them. You're paying them all the time. Number two, it's a lot easier for them to support. Instead of having to worry about, well, you have Office 2013, I got to support Office 2010, I got to also support maybe somebody in Office 2007 as those new versions come out. Everybody in the cloud's all on the same version, and they're all on the same exact copy of the server. Right? There's no having to worry about, well, some people are on this brand, some people are on that brand. It just makes their support so much easier, and so it's really a win-win. And that's really true for any vendor. It doesn't matter whether it's Microsoft, Google, whoever. There's a lot of benefits to them, certainly, of having a model like this. But of course, what's in it for me? What do I get out of being in this? Well, first of all, you're already using cloud computing in almost all cases, and so a lot of people don't realize if you're using Google, if you're using Facebook or LinkedIn, any of these other services, guess what? They're all already on cloud services, so you're already using them. Right? You're using social media, you're using email broadcast services, online backup, Dropbox, all these things are all online services. So why would you consider it? What would be the reason why you would consider using the cloud? And know that it's not a picture that was modeled from me. I don't know where it came from exactly. I don't like the bird on the head so much, but hey. So why use cloud? The biggest reason in many cases is that real big companies, that IT department I showed that wheel early on, they want to be back in charge again. So, you know, their IT costs have gotten out of control. They're supporting hundreds or thousands of PCs. They're updating them all the time. And you know what? Wouldn't it be a lot easier just to control it all from one place? And so as a big company, you're seeing that's a huge driver for them. Also, if you're a startup, you know, it's like, hey, I don't really want to buy servers and all that kind of stuff. Well, then don't. Or I'm a virtual company. I don't, you know, I have people in different locations. We don't really have a main office per se. Well, then why would I want to have servers? The cloud's a lot easier. But for most of the rest of us, we fit into that last category, which is, well, is there an economic advantage? Is there cost savings because I improve customer service? Is there something else that I need that's going to make this be a competitive advantage for me and my business? It really becomes a business decision. And that's where I think we're not trying to tell people that they should or shouldn't. It's like, well, it depends on your specific situation. And I guess one other thing I want to point out is that going to the cloud is not an all or nothing proposition, and a lot of times I think people think it is. I got to go to the cloud or I got to stay on my current. Well, no, actually what's most common is a hybrid solution. So some of the benefits, definitely it should lower your hardware costs. You're not going to spend as much money on servers at least, which then in turn should lower your IT support costs. You really does give you the ability to access from any device, tablets and all that kind of stuff, smartphones, PCs in your hotel room, wherever you can get an internet connection. You can basically get to your desktop anywhere, right? And you've got, in essence, built-in disaster recovery, in that if your office is not available because of any kind of natural disaster or otherwise, then just walk down to a local Starbucks, or better yet, go home or go someplace else with a more secure connection, and you're still up and operational and in business. So it gives you built-in business continuity. And it does give you variability, so you can scale up or scale down as you need to if your business tends to be that way. But as with anything, it's not all good news. There certainly are trade-offs as well. And so what are some of those trade-offs? Well, the first thing is we tend to look at what's the total cost of ownership. So it basically becomes what I think of as a rent versus buy decision. So we'll get into more details about that in a little bit here. You're definitely going to lose some control, right? So things like password policy, you know, you're going to be stuck. It's not what your password policy is. You're going to be stuck with what the cloud vendor's password policy is. And so if they say you must have a 13-digit password that has number of special characters that must be changed once every 3 months because that's what we need to make sure we're secure, well, guess what? That's now going to be your password policy. So, you know, little things like that can be a pain. Obviously, payment status can be a pain because, you know, if you're not paying your monthly bill, just like your electricity, gets shut off. Whereas if you have a server in-house and cash flow's tight, that server's still there. So You could have speed issues. That's probably the single biggest thing that people worry about. Again, we're seeing our clients are having more and more ability to upgrade to Comcast or some of the other cable providers out there, that Charter and others like that will allow them to deal with that speed. Although they're not always getting the speed they think they should be getting, but it's there. Some people worry about security and where their data is, because your data is no longer, on a box you can touch in your office. It's there somewhere in the cloud. For some people, that's a huge concern. Others, not so much. And there's pros and cons to that as well. Certainly from a data security standpoint, I would say that most data centers are much more secure than most people can possibly provide in their own individual computing environment. Yet that data is going over a wire, and so is it hackable proof? Of course not. It's always possible. A big one people forget to think about is integration, and what I mean by that is that oftentimes you may not even realize you have software that is tied together on your server. We think of, for example, we had one that we did a couple of years ago where they moved to the cloud and realized that after they had moved that all of their voicemail was tied into their Exchange email as well. And so all of a sudden the voicemail stopped working. This is something that they hadn't thought about. Oh, wait a minute, we need to make sure that our voicemail system also talks and works directly with Exchange. We got that one figured out, but it's one of those things where you would have liked to have planned in advance. What are some of the things that I need to make sure are talking to each other in my environment that maybe won't if one's still local and one is off-site in the cloud? Certainly makes you more dependent on the internet. So if your internet goes down, in essence, that's it. You got to go find someplace else to get that connectivity, or you just can't work. Now, sometimes the internet goes down because there's no power. In that case, you're out of luck either way. Whether you had your server or internet-based cloud software, you still can't work. But you need to make sure you have a reliable internet connection. And in many cases, what we'll recommend is that internet connection be redundant. So we'll have a backup. It maybe it might be worth it to have a T1 that now used to be the primary and is now a backup, and that primary, maybe is a couple $100 a month, but it makes sure that we're never down. And then another trade-off potentially could be support, depending upon who you're dealing with and exactly what their support policies are. Many of them, your support guarantees you get a call back within 2 or 3 days, or maybe you can only produce support requests via email. You want to make sure about support, because that support on the cloud, sometimes you get what you pay for in that arena. So just as a summary here, here's some of the on-premise versus hosted advantages, disadvantages. Again, these slides will be available for you, and we'll be happy to send it to you if you'd like them. So what benefits are most important to you? Which of these things make the most amount of sense, and which trade-offs are the ones that continue the most, right? So I'm not going to do a poll on this. I think just because of time, but this was really meant to be, you need to think about, what are the things that concern you the most. So what I want to talk about a little bit is here's this whole idea of all or nothing. And so just kind of walk through the whole continuum of options. What I'm showing here on the screen right now is a depiction of a typical network, which means that all of the servers and all the workstations are all on-premise. That's what the bottom portion below the line is. There's a firewall between you and the internet, and then the internet is out there for browsing and all the typical functions that people oftentimes use it for. The first step that a lot of people will take to kind of start moving into the cloud is they'll replace that tape drive and put it up into a remote data storage, a virtualized server that's going to keep all of their data replicated in the cloud. Oftentimes that's also supplemented by a local device, so you have both, because there certainly are still speed issues. They're not as bad as they used to be, but that's a lot. People have a lot of data, and getting all that data up in the cloud can take time. Then as things move along, the next thing is maybe we put email up in the cloud. Microsoft Exchange is a fairly expensive piece of software, and the hardware to use it can be expensive, and it starts adding up a lot of storage space. And so again, sometimes you run through that discussion and go through and look at the rent versus buy and say, you know what, we're better off to rent email instead of buying the server and buying all the services around it. Basically, for most people, hosted Exchange in the cloud, you use your same Outlook client. So for the typical user, they don't even notice the difference. If we move someone from their own Exchange onto a hosted Exchange platform, it's usually done over a weekend. And on Monday morning, the users come in, they log into their Outlook, and all their email is there just like it always is. And it really functions just the same. So from a user standpoint, not a big deal. It really just becomes a variable cost factor of, adding people as you need to in that cloud environment. So you do give a little bit of control. Maybe, again, I mentioned the password change thing. Integration, again, what are you integrating to? Does your Exchange integrate into your accounting system or into your CRM system or something like that? Well, let's make sure it's all going to still work if it's on hosted Exchange. A lot of times those systems will use your Outlook and not your Exchange. Again, Outlook is the piece on your desktop. Exchange is the mailbox on the server. So once you move that mailbox to a server off-premise, is everything else still going to work? And then lastly, of course, is the idea of retention period. If you have your email on your server, then all of that email you can keep as long as you want to keep it, as long as you have room on that server to keep it. Typically, for a lot of the hosted applications for Exchange, there is a limit, either in terms of retention period of how long you're going to keep those emails, or in terms of size. So moving along with this, to the next piece now, we've already moved the data storage off, the backups, I should say, and the email. And now the next thing is maybe we need to move some of our applications onto the internet. So we will do that as well. And all of a sudden now you're seeing you really have a hybrid environment. You have some things that are still on site and some things that are on the internet. And so I'll come back to this. I'll just show you. I think for some people that have never seen it, I'm just going to show you. We'll use an application. We'll use Computerease and just show you how Computerease in the cloud versus Computerease local, what they look like. I'm going to do that after I get through the rest of the presentation, make sure we have enough time. So then finally, if you move your file storage into the cloud, you now have a picture that looks like this, that basically everything is in the cloud. You have a firewall on-premise, and you have workstations on-premise, and that's it. Everything else is actually all off-site. So any one of those scenarios can work. So what I want to spend a few minutes here now is kind of going through some of the numbers with you as an example, because a big part of this is running through, well, where are there, and if so, what are the cost savings for me? And of course, everybody's situation is going to be different. In this case, I just took a 15-user system, and looking at making an investment in that system, buying a server and the operating system, the email server, the tape drive that I might use in a pure equipment-based decision, and then all the applications I would buy and continue to maintain. So there's a big upfront cost there. Of course, with the cloud, that upfront cost is zero. And then instead, I look at, well, what would that cost if what are my recurring costs? Well, again, on-premise, I'm going to spend something for software maintenance. I'm going to spend, some amount of money for network support services. In the cloud, though, all of these things are all variable costs. They're all monthly. So server hosting is monthly, and the operating system is monthly, and the Exchange email and the backup services, and every component of that is all metered separately. And so the monthly cost, again, 15 users, that wouldn't, again, that could vary from user to user. Just here's an example. And of course, you still have some network support costs involved because you still have workstations and firewalls and things like that. So you look at that and you say, well, that's my annual, so then what's my total, what's my rent versus buy? So if I look at my initial investment plus my monthly cost, and I take that over 3 years and I say, well, what's my total 3-year cost of ownership, my TCO? And in this example here, you can see that it's going to cost me more by taking in that initial investment than it would be if I was in the cloud. So on a 3-year basis, I'd say, oh yeah, I should definitely, I'm going to save some money in the cloud, plus all the other factors. But what happens when I go to a 4th year? Well, it's pretty much of a wash at that point in time. They're pretty much the same. And if I go to a 5th year, which certainly is not unusual for clients of ours in terms of their lives of their servers, it's just the other way. So the point here being that, it's not, it's not a clear-cut, definite one way or the other. These cost estimates will vary from user to user, depending on how many people you have and all different applications that you have and a whole bunch of other factors. There's no one thing that's going to say, oh yeah, you must go one way or the other. So how do you decide? What our feeling is that, stay on premise. If you want to maintain control over your data, it's all right there, so you know exactly where it is. You maybe don't have a good internet connection anyhow. Maybe you can't we still have clients that can't get fast internet. They just are not, the cable companies or fiber or whatever else, broadband, some of them now, they just are not reaching into your area. The software that you use to run your business works best in an on-premise environment. It isn't really built for the cloud. That's definitely oftentimes the case. We see that the most with things like estimating and AutoCAD, things like that. They're just so resource intensive, it's going to be difficult to make them work in the cloud environment. Certainly, if you just spent some money on upgrading your server in the last 2-3 years, that's already there. It'd be like saying, let me go out and buy a new car, and then a couple of years later, well, should I be renting one instead? Well, no, that new car is still fine. Let's wait till it kind of gets a little bit older and then take a look at it. So those are some of the things about how you decide if you're going to stay on premise. How to go to the cloud? Well, first of all, you trust that there's a secure connection to your data. You have a good, reliable, fast internet connection. The software that you use works best in a cloud environment. And a big part of it, the time to decide really, is when you're looking at, well, should I spend money on new server equipment or not? So if your hardware is getting old, getting up there in age, maybe it's time to take a look at, let's, instead of just replacing it and upgrading everything, maybe some things should go off-site. So what we're seeing is that most of our clients are doing a little bit of both. They're putting some things on premise and they're putting some things up on the cloud. Like I mentioned, it's like, well, who are the people that need access from anywhere? Typically, that's people in the field, people in sales. They may not be in the office much anyhow. Well, they would be the natural people to go first into the cloud environment, and then some of the specialized applications would follow. The other thing to do certainly is to adopt applications that will work well either way. So a lot of CRM applications can have, basically, you could have both. You can have something local for people that are sitting in the office. You could have the web version for people that are outside of the office, and they're really hitting the same database. So everything that they're updating is updating and visible to all users no matter where they are. Some of the other things you could use as well, things like time entry, project management, are very typical. There's just so many people from the outside of the office and not in front of a desk. It makes sense. Some of the things that oftentimes, people will tell me, well, I really want to use cloud because we want remote access for our users. And if that's the only thing you want, there's other ways to do that. And I would never recommend to someone to just go to cloud just because they have some users that need to get remote access. You can get remote access by a technology called VPN, which is called virtual private networking. You can get it from remote desktop services, terminal services. You can relatively inexpensively. Even GoToMeeting or go to MyPC in some cases for just one user. There's lots of ways to maybe deal with a ability to get in remotely and do work before you say I got to do everybody in the cloud or not. And just give you an example, we have a firm, one of our clients that had a distributed sales force. They have people all over the country basically. Their home office was in Chicago. They had a big branch office in North Carolina. 12 total regular users. Most of those were salespeople. They were used to email, CRM. They had a custom application they needed to use, so it wasn't like it was all clear one way or the other. And so they were set up with a couple of servers at the home office. Those servers were about 4 years old. Their remote office and all their Salesforce connected via the terminal server remote desktop, and that worked out just fine. But what they wanted to do is they wanted to start reducing their reliance upon the home office. And so there was starting to think about succession planning and where do we take the business from here. I don't want to really spend more money on hardware is what they told me. So it's like, well, what do we do? What's our best scenario? In this case, what we did, we provided for them a private cloud. So private cloud is not quite the same thing as pure cloud. Pure cloud is, you've got to have everything is going to be a cloud-based application. In this case, we took some of their custom applications and gave them and put them in a private environment. No one else is sharing that data on the cloud. It's just theirs. Move their email to the cloud as well. And so when we looked at, well, what are the costs for that? And when we looked at it, it was pretty much a wash. They were going to need to spend some money up front if they went on premise, but the monthly was going to take a certain amount to cover everything they needed to do as well. So on a 4-year total cost ownership basis, it was pretty much a wash. And so not atypical. I think a lot of times people will think I'm going to get these savings by going to the cloud. It doesn't always work out that way. But again, in this particular case, there were other compelling reasons why they felt it made sense to go cloud. And that's the direction they went. So if you do go to the cloud, what are the things you should look for? Make sure that the company that's providing you with cloud services, number one, provides what's called an SLA. Of course, it's a computer terminology, so it's got to be an acronym. SLA, as we show here, stands for Service Level Agreement. What that Service Level Agreement is going to say is that we guarantee that you will be up within 99.99%. So here somebody will talk about 2 nines or 3 nines, and that means just the numbers after the decimal. So 2 nines means you're up 99.99% of the time. 3 nines mean they're guaranteeing 99.999% of the time. Again, not a huge difference to most companies, but that extra 0.001. But you want to know what their guarantee is. You also want to know what the guarantee is in terms of response time for resolving issues if it is down. You want to know what your ability will be to get your data retrieved. If you decide you want your data back for any reason, you should be able to get it at any time. How stable is that company? How long they've been around? What the service? What are their service references? What is their position in regards to how often they might want to change the metered price? What are you locked into at all? So some of the things to look at if you want to go on a cloud side. So how do you determine if cloud computing is right for you? And we offer a free cloud readiness assessment where we will take a look at your computer network, your internet speed, your backups, take a look at what you're spending on IT right now, look at some of your security issues, the speed and performance of your network, and from all of that, gives you a cost-benefit analysis of what would be a best fit for you. So if you're interested in doing that, please just send an email to info@cssworks.com. Put in there Cloud Readiness Assessment. We'd be happy to help you with trying to figure out what the best thing is for you. Okay, I've actually covered most of what I wanted to show you. I'm happy to entertain, I guess I have a few minutes here for questions. While that's going on, let me also show you a little bit of the difference between just what a cloud application might look like or not. So here, I'm just going to open up Computer Ease, and log in, and let's just go to our Job Center and just run a quick Job Center. And there you see there's a pretty fast, it's on a local PC. Now, let's go do that in the cloud. So I'm going to go log into the cloud here. I get my login. username, password didn't work. Okay, it worked yesterday. Great. Well, I guess I can't show it to you. My password got changed and nobody told me about it. This is what happened. So apologize for that. From one day to the next, things can change like that, I guess. All right. So see if I have any questions coming up here. One person's question coming in here is, what do I do about internet speed? How do I check that? Make sure I'm getting the speed I need for the internet. The answer there is that there is easily, you can go to the internet and go to speedtest.net and check your internet speed. I might be able to do that right here and show you what that looks like. Let me just give you a second here. So there's many of them out there, but if you just go to www. How about 3 W's? Speedtest.net. One of the things to be careful about when you do that, I Googled it. I want to just go right there. When it first pops up, sometimes you get this first part that wants you to log into and check your speeds on your PC itself, and you actually want to wait till you get to this part where it says begin test. So all you got to do is click on this, begin test. It's going to go through, take a look at the speed I'm getting, and give me both an upload and a download speed, and both of those are important. Typically on a network, download speed is important, or easy to get, I should say, and upload speed can be an issue. Now in this case, my speed is not so good right now. And so one of those things where if you're not getting the kind of speed you think you should be getting, if I think that we're really supposed to be getting 20 or 30 megabits per second down, and I'm getting, it looks like in this case, 1, we need to call the provider and say what's going on, because we should be getting a lot better than that. So it's interesting. Sometimes it's just to run this just to see, because you think you're paying for a certain amount of speed and you're not getting it. Then and with speed like this, I would not be using the cloud right now. I'm barely able to do a webinar. So I'm not sure what's going on with that again, but here's a really easy way to see what kind of speed you're getting. If you're paying for more than that, then it's time to look and talk to your vendor and see what else is going on. If not, and that is the speed you're supposed to get, see if there's anything else available to you. All right. I don't have any other questions coming at this point in time, so I hope that all of you got something out of this and learned a little bit more about cloud computing. And glad you were able to join us today. Please check out our website at cssworks.com for additional webinars coming up in the future. Enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you.